Turtles all the way down. I'm Jake, sometimes Jenk. Today we have a conversation with Richard Gudiño, and yes, he is related to the other Gudiño that's been on this podcast a couple of times, including the first one that was Rodrigo, and this is his brother Richard, who's an equally a great guy, great family. I know several people from their family, and very talented bunch. And in this case, Richard is kind of a family man. He's got 6 kids. He has a regular job, and but he's now sparked his interest again in heavy metal music. And he used to be in a band called Medieval Rhyme, and he's bringing it back to life, and he's doing it in a different way these days. And what he's doing is he started a crowdsourcing campaign to get together enough money to professionally record a song with some very well-known, musicians that are in the genre of heavy metal music, which is what Medieval Rhyme is all about. And it's the bass guitar that Richard plays. So we talk a lot about, obviously, as I like to do with the guests that are on the show, with music, with religion, with technology, with philosophy. And at the end, Richard actually plays a little bit of bass guitar for us as well. And so we're going to have the links on the description here for his crowdsourcing campaign. Go check it out. It's kind of cool, and you'll be able to take part in this project to get some of this wonderful heavy metal music out to the world, courtesy of Richard Gudiño. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Talk soon. Like, I might not even start the episode until like 5 minutes into it or something.
Gotcha.
So I might chop off a little from the beginning and and that's about it. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but it works well.
Yeah, so Medieval Rhyme is a dream kind of situation for me. I've been living on my own since I was 16.
Wow. And
at the age of 18, it was meeting this particular band that made me drop out of high school and say, you know what, this is what I want to do with my life.
Wow.
Unfortunately, the reality is much different from the dream. So although we got started and we were writing a bunch of stuff, and it was very, very intense.
So these are your buddies from high school that you're going to school with them. You decide to form a band. You call it Medieval Rhyme.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's a heavy metal thing.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So what were the bands that you were into at that time? Like what's fueling this?
So what's fueling this would have been the classic kind of British new wave of heavy metal. Mm-hmm. So whether it be Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, usual suspects. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're in Toronto, so obviously early Rush.
It's funny you include that in the little string of bands that you just named. Rush, you wouldn't normally think of. It's interesting that you include that because
especially the early material,
right, which
was quite influenced by, I would say, Led Zeppelin and Yes, so quite progressive and aggressive in nature. And I think Neil Peart in particular really captured my imagination, not only in terms of percussion, but even more so with his, lyrically.
That's true, right? Because he wrote all of those songs.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So what you could say in that medium to me, as evidenced by Neil Peart, was very, very inspirational for me. So I would say lyrically, I would say it'd be Neil Peart and interestingly enough, Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath. A lot of people don't realize actually Geezer Butler, the bass player who does all the lyrics.
I didn't know that. Yeah, okay.
Let's call them the kind of religious kind of themes that he introduced to the whole genre.
Oh, so that's where it began? Because I often wondered, because there's a lot of religion in there, and as a result of that, there's also a lot of, I don't know what you call it, Satanism, sure. That sort of thing, so it's kind of an interesting interplay. And as I understand, you're a good Catholic boy, aren't you? You're getting into this heavy metal music in high school. What's going on there?
That's right. So it started there. It started with that. So to comment first on the business of religion and metal, it's not really well talked about. But the imagery is clearly there. You even go to a Slayer concert, you go to any other concert, you see all these crosses all over the place.
Yeah.
So what's this about? And I ultimately don't know, but why that is. But other than to say that, I think it reminds me a little bit of classical music.
How so?
Right? Well, in the sense of of you know, a lot of classical music is has religious themes. It's all about,
Right.
you know, there's apocalyptic kind of themes.
Oh, okay. Like Wagnerian.
The whole requiem mass kind of genre that many composers from Mozart to Brahms have explored. And then you have bands like Black Sabbath and all these bands that we just alluded to, even in their names, there's a kind of a religious kind of tone there. Sabbath,
right.
You know,
Judas Priest.
yeah, right. Et cetera, et cetera. And so it was that material that lyrically, because remember in those days you'd have the albums and you really spent a lot of time looking at these big LPs,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
And thanks to the Beatles and Sgt. Pepper's, everyone started printing the lyrics on there. So I would spend my time reading them, and that got me to start reading the Bible.
No kidding.
So for example, you know, you have your people like Iron Maiden directly quoting, you know.
Right. So rock and roll leads to religion.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit mysterious, but it's there. It's there. And so that got me started reading the Bible, and that on my own personal journey ended with Catholicism years later.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, but going on the music thread, what happened was that, you know, it didn't work out. Just we got into the classic kind of band problems, personality issues, whether it be egos or even more seriously, you know, addictions of different sorts. It just didn't work. And so I moved on. We all moved on into our different lives. At that point, for me, I came very close to dedicating my life to music in general, but I realized, you know what? I'm less interested in becoming a musician than being a part of this thing called medieval rhyme.
Huh. Okay.
So for me, that's how big it was.
Wow.
And so when that was over, you know, we all kind of moved on. I married my best friend, got married, have kids, et cetera, et cetera. And awesome. I left it for, it was about an 8-year period in the whole 90s where I literally didn't touch the instrument.
Yeah.
And then, but then it called me back. You know, it called me back, and I started replaying and just kept it going. I've actually started teaching bass again as far as started getting going a bit. And then it was actually my kids, as when they would hear me play this kind of different stuff, it was like, Dad, what is that? And so I would play and said, Dad, you should record that. That sounds really... So
different stuff, meaning what, the metal that you would play that was different to them? Is that
right? Well, the original metal, the medieval rhyme material.
Right. Okay, got you.
So, so they thought that you know, I should do something with it, and so it kept growing from there. Back in, it would have been almost 10 years ago in 2008, I reached out to the original co-founders, the 2 guitar players, to see if we could revive it. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. For them, it's almost like a bad marriage, right? You just don't want to go back to an ex.
They just wanted to move on, yeah.
Right. But for me, to continue the metaphor, for me, it was more of it's like a sickly child that needs to be nurtured, and it's got potential. I saw the huge potential there.
So to you, it felt like you were abandoning something rather than escaping it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, you know, fast forward to today, now just past 50, I'm thinking, gee, this is not getting any quieter for me. This is getting louder and louder. What's up with this? So that's when I started talking to my brother, Rodrigo, to see, you know, is there anything else that we could do about this? And because he's a huge fan, he's one of my biggest supporters, and really feel blessed by that.
Yeah, it's great.
And so we were working on this crowdfunding campaign. It's launched Monday the 20th there, so just a few days ago.
Monday the 20th,
yeah.
Right, okay.
And so Indiegogo, generosity.com. So, and it's really, it's not about becoming a rock star. It's not about, you know, going on tour anytime soon. It's really about bringing this music to life. Okay. And so what I've done at this iteration is I've reached out to my favorite musicians
Some big names, as I understand.
That's right. So the two that I wanted to mention at this point, because there will be some other runs announced, is Nick Walsh on vocals from Slick Toxic.
Right. Wow.
He's one of my favorite metal singers of all time.
Really?
He's just fabulous and a great guy as well. So I feel really privileged that he's given his nod to recording this one song. We thought we would just start with this one song.
Okay. Yeah.
One song, original song by Medieval Rhyme, and then getting a producer by the name of Russ McKay, a very kind of big name in his own right. He's worked with Iron Maiden and Styx and Tragically Hip. Yeah. So they kind of own the ultimate sound, right? And so
that's very important. Yeah,
crucial.
That's true. Yeah.
And so we're really excited about launching this and then getting in the studio coming New Year.
So you've got these well-known figures from the world of heavy metal. They're going to be playing with you. You're going to do one song, but is this song something that you're going to write entirely on your own and present it to them, and they're going to learn and play it? Or is there some kind of collaboration in terms of the creation of it as well?
No, it's actually already written.
Oh, it's an existing song.
This is going back.
So you're using, okay.
This tune was written in the 80s.
Wow.
And there'll be some alterations here and there just to kind of refresh things a little bit.
How did you pick that song?
Yeah, that's a good question because there's a lot of material. So how did I pick that song?
It would be hard to pick one.
I needed something that was fairly straightforward, that wasn't going to be too demanding from a time commitment standpoint from the other musicians. So it's the most straightforward one I could think of. Mm-hmm. I also thought from a potential hit perspective,
you got to look for the hook. I
think it's got some hooks in there. So, Nick himself says, he thinks it could be a really big, huge track. So, so it took some consideration, and so it's all written, all the lyrics are done, melodies, etc. So they just have to sit down and learn them.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. Let's say this works out well and exactly the way you want. You put out the song, you get some recognition. What's your ideal scenario that's resulting from all of this?
Well, thank you for that. So. So it's, one song is only just one song. So it really would be about an LP eventually, right? Just putting together a whole LP of material. I don't think I could do more than that. Because the original co-founders, the other two original co-founders are not involved in the project. They really, as Richard, if you want to do it, you go ahead, right?
Did they sign off on everything? Because who knows, it could be big.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, so they'll be getting full credit for their participation on the writing end of things. But yeah.
Amazing. So, the music industry's changed a great deal since you were in high school. And even 10 years ago, it's changed a great deal. So, if you put out this record, do they still call it a record? What do they call it?
An LP. They'll still retire. Right. Yeah, recording track.
Right. Yeah. So, how do you get noticed these days? Like, that's the difficult thing, right? I mean, you could write an amazing work and not get noticed these days. Which unless you have this marketing muscle behind you, like someone like Britney Spears or whoever is, Lady Gaga or something these days.
Right. So I think that's why we're going the crowdfunding campaign route.
Yeah, that gets some attention,
right? To get some attention, but also we've partnered with. We're reaching out to different media sponsors. So one would be Rodrigo's Rumor magazine, and the other one we're very excited about is Banger Films.
Oh,
Banger Films, who's done a bunch of work in documentaries for different.
Right on.
Well, and metal in particular, and just to help to get the word out there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And also to, at least in Rod's case and a few others that we're working on, to contribute. In terms of offering perks for people that donate X, then we'll give them X plus Y, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to look at the at our launch page for more information on that.
How much money are you trying to raise? Like, what does it cost?
5,000 is the number.
5,000. Okay.
5,000 for one song, absolutely professionally made, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a whole lot.
No, it's doable.
A little bit more than I can justify with all these kids, right?
Yeah, 6 kids.
That's right.
That's amazing.
That's right.
Yeah, you've taken a kind of an entirely different life path than I have, for example.
Right.
I mean, we're about the same age. I just turned 50 recently.
I'm 51.
51, yeah.
And congratulations, by welcome to the 50s.
Thank you. And it's funny. I was just commenting the other day with a couple of friends of mine that it's not really until this year, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm being hyper sensitive and noticing these things, but like I'm noticing creaks and, like when I get up, there's like noises being made and I'm just hypersensitive to all of it, but something's changing. It feels different.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was, messing with my head until I started looking back. But I found the months leading to my 50th birthday were difficult somehow.
Interesting.
For me. Yeah. And in terms of the body creaking, absolutely, which is why I'm kind of big on trying to eat clean, eat healthy, and work out once in a while, right?
Just you're doing powerlifting.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So what kind of weights? Is it the squats or?
So powerlifting is to do with the squat, bench press, and the deadlift.
So the bench press is in there too. Okay.
Is in there, right? And as well as a few other movements, power cleans, etc. Yeah. And it's really about getting strong. It's not about getting big, or it's not bodybuilding. I'm not nearly vain enough or hardworking enough to devote that much time to this sort of thing.
Yeah, some people are a little nuts with that.
It's completely functional. Just trying to get strong, and it's actually fun. There's a real fun factor. I did grow up with extreme sports. When I was young, I actually raced dirt bikes, motocross in my teens as well, and there's a little bit of that extreme sport in powerlifting.
Yeah, that can get a little hairy,
right?
Yeah.
So
did you break stuff? Or?
Yeah, it's fun, but there's nothing like playing the bass, right? And for me, in terms of that extreme sport. So
do you still jam with buddies? Do you? I mean, up until now. I mean, now you're getting into it, but before, like recently.
Yes, no, I do. So what I'll do is I'm part of different. Well, I do jam with a few different groups of guys, and again, just for fun. Although we have done some local gigs here and there, but I'm also involved in another group, more kind of classic rock oriented for fundraisers, whether we're raising funds for the kids' school, etc. So, in fact, I played with one of my daughters last week. That was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah, you have some very talented people in your family.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
It's all around, it seems. It's amazing.
There's a lot of arts in there, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've just met you today, but, I know a few members of your family already. Yeah, wonderful people.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, as I said, I just turned 50 and and I have kind of notions like this every now and then. And I even thought maybe, here I am, I'm 50. I started playing music a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Again, and I used to play the drums back in high school, and we used to be in bands. And but back then, I used to be kind of in punk bands, alternative, weird, noisy stuff, whatever.
Awesome.
Nothing really musical in it much anyway. But then I left it all alone for 20 plus years, maybe even close to 30. Yeah, and then a few years ago, it just started coming back to me. I just started, I got a drum kit. I got this Ableton Live, system here, and I started messing with that. And I've been playing live shows, and I've got another show coming up on Sunday.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
good for you.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what an incredible vibrancy it lends to your life just to play music.
That's right. Now, so that's what we're hoping. My story will connect with people, because I think there's a lot of folks in my situation that they grew up with music, with bands, and life took over and they moved on. I think the music industry, the business of it, is full of, these kind of musicians that were once upon a time in bands, and for whatever reason their music didn't work out. Yeah. And so, I wanted to take a stab at this and see if we really focus on just one completed song.
Awesome.
What can happen there? But just to comment further, just briefly on what you just said, I can't believe how much better it feels to play that stuff today than it did as a young guy.
Really?
Right?
Tell me more. What do you mean? How so?
So, for me at least, as a young man in my late teens and early 20s, playing medieval rhyme, it was very high stress. There was a real obsession. There's a lot of kind of looking back, a bit of ego there, and it wasn't really fun. And when I really look back, it was. There's a obsession and a high stress kind of.
Yeah, takes away from the fun if you're.
Yeah, especially with our music, it was technically quite demanding. But today, it's it's completely different. It's pure fun. You know, I'm not trying to become a rock star here. This is pure joy. You know, this music to me, like a child, has life, I think, and potential. So, you know, would love to share it and see if I'm, you know, who else might be able to appreciate it.
How does the songs hold up? You know, those old songs that you did all those years ago. Yeah.
Well, I ultimately won't know till they're out, right?
Yeah.
I think they hold up pretty well. I mean, quite well. You know, with the disclaimer that it is that, you know, classic kind of 80s metal kind of a genre. So, you know, I do think they hold up. I personally, and I'm super biased. I mean, I love the material. I mean, I really love the energy and the spirit of it. So unlike just about anything else, musically.
So the bass, do you play other instruments? Or
my first instrument was the classical guitar.
Okay.
I started classical guitar when I was about 7 or 8 in Mexico, where I'm originally from. Immigrated to Canada at age 10, and at 16, a friend of mine put a bass guitar in my hands. Actually, put a guitar in my hands, and I couldn't deal with the pick, so he said, well, why don't you try a bass? And it was like love at first touch. It was just... And unfortunately, because I really do love the sound of the classical guitar, it's the feel of the bass that really, for some bizarre reason, really calls me, and that's what I play exclusively of. Yeah.
But it seems bassists don't get the recognition that, you know, obviously the lead singer gets most of the, you know, because they're the front person, but the drummer sometimes gets attention.
No, it's true. Yeah. It's true. You know, I think behind any great band, there's a great bass player, or at least a great bass line. And it is true. You know, when I first started playing the instrument, you know, a lot of the you know, the metal bass lines or rock and roll lines that I was learning were quite basic and straightforward, which is why I was attracted to, you know, more ambitious players like your Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, you know, like your Geddy Lee from Rush, and a few others outside of metal, like Jaco Pastorius and these other folks. So yeah, to me, it's, you know, it's the bass. Although it doesn't have an image for being the most challenging instrument, it's like any other instrument. It might be a little bit easier to learn at the outset to get started on it, but I think it takes at least as much work as any other instrument to truly master.
Well, of course, right?
Like it's unbelievable.
And there's always going to be that last mile is the thing that most people don't get to, and most people don't even recognize or notice anyway. So it's sometimes, you know, you said that some of your songs were, you know, technically challenging, right? But most people aren't even going to hear the detail that you're putting into it.
That's right.
But you know it's there, right? And the aficionados might pick up on it, I guess. And that's so. Do you feel like you're playing for? Who are you playing for when you're playing?
Oh, that's a really good question there, Jake. So for me, at the end of the day, when I'm in the zone and I'm playing that stuff, for what it's worth, it's actually a form of prayer for me.
Wow.
Right? So it's a spiritual kind of connection and experience for me. So it's not so much about, and I regret to say it, to play for a specific audience. I mean, obviously that, I think if you do connect spiritually, that I think we all have that in us. So I think people will respond in kind. But
a form of prayer.
The way it's worked. Pardon me?
You said it's a form of prayer in a way.
I think so.
Yeah. Tell me more about that, because I'm not a religious person.
Sure.
I don't know if you know this about me, but I pretty much grew up atheist.
Yes.
And but recently, the last several years, I've been taking psychedelics actually quite a bit, and oddly enough, the psychedelics have led me to a place where I sound more religious and spiritual.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
like the vocabulary that's necessary to talk about and describe some of those experiences sound very much like religious experiences.
Yes.
To people. So I have much more in common with with the religiosity of the people that I come across than I used to. In the past, it would have seemed alien to me. You know, it would have been something that I wouldn't have really spent a lot of time trying to engage. It would be like, oh, that's not going to work in my, cognitive sphere. So I would just kind of move on from it. But
Yes.
there's a lot to mine in there. And when you say that it's kind of a form of prayer. So, I mean, I'd like to know more about your conception of God and what you are experiencing when you're doing that. What sort of is there a give and take going, or is it just is it a unidirectional communication? Is it bidirectional?
Right. So that's a very difficult question, and there's no way I'm going to be able to give it justice, but I'll do my best. Sure. I'll try and answer it in two ways. One is in terms of the lyrical content of the music, of the rhyme. Because I alluded to earlier that, Neil Peart and Geezer Butler in particular were very big influences. So I think you've studied philosophy before. So
yes.
The lyrics are quite kind of geeky and brainy, right? So in terms of, I'm quoting Immanuel Kant and the noumenal world, and I don't use the word God as much as I use ipsis subsistens, right? So that the very Latin kind of conception for pure being, sheer act of being, which was understanding what God was. So, I guess the shorter version to answer your question is, I'm trying to get into lyrically in bursting into metaphysics, right? Touching into metaphysics. So, not so much okay, here's God, but you know what? There is the realm of the invisible that the ancients, I think, were so kind of maybe even obsessed with that we've really forgotten and lost in our modern, since the Enlightenment, quote unquote Enlightenment.
So that is a turning point, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
but I guess even with the Enlightenment and before, going back to even the pre-Socratics, everyone's basically trying to think about the same things or trying to answer the same kind of questions. It's like, what the fuck's going on? That's kind of the most basic question. And then I go to the next step, which is how should I live?
Right.
And I spent a great deal of time thinking about the first type of questions,
yes.
Like what's going on. And I would study, physics and cosmology and science and all of that other stuff, psychology and, and you think that you get a pretty good answer of what's going on by reducing things to their, elemental parts. But eventually, I realized that that's only one way to look at something, and I have to admit it's probably one of the most effective ways to get information from the universe is to have kind of like the scientific method approach, where you're being skeptical in a sense. You're holding yourself and everybody else to a high standard of consistency and logic, and I think it's very important for me to do that. But I still, these days I allow myself some speculation.
Yes.
Beyond that, and and you have to in a sense, because once you break everything down into its constituent parts, you find that often at the very core of things there's a paradox.
Yes.
There's always this kind of infinite regress or loop, and in fact the title of this podcast is Turtles All the Way Down because of this. I noticed
that. Very interesting.
Right.
Very. We can talk about that, but go ahead.
Right.
I love it.
This infinite loop, and see, I'm getting off track now. Start talking.
Well, I think to try and scratch the thread of what I believe you were getting at is I agree with you. I think I'm hearing you. And I think we both studied philosophy at U of T. Although you did it at a much more advanced stage than I did. And so maybe it's an age thing, but for me, although lyrically there is this kind of philosophical, metaphysical content in there, for me, the bigger interest as of late has been more about, how should we live? So more about spirituality and the life of the emotions and whatnot. Because there is a sense in which, at least for me, the merely kind of technical pursuit of speculative philosophy is a little bit, opaque and it's doesn't really give the account for the phenomenon of experience sometimes, right? And so to try and connect to that second way of answering your initial question, one was about metaphysics. The other one is going to sound very corny, but it's all about the love, right?
Yeah,
it's all about the love. I mean, it's really not a big
the hippies were right, man.
In my view, I think all the religions talk about it. I think most philosophers in some way or another do, will get to that in terms of how should we then live. But to actually practice it, at least for me as a husband and father of 6 kids, it's been really, really challenging. Being a single man, I was just not nearly as accountable as I am now or have been. And so I've had to really, really do some growing up. And even to this day, I'm still really working on growing in love. And so those themes I also throw into lyrically, although it's expressed in more philosophical language, right? Very, very powerful stuff here. Very, very big stuff you're talking about here.
So philosophy is something I do enjoy talking about, and religion more so these days. When I was in my teens and early 20s, it was more like Friedrich Nietzsche was one of my. So he was, so it kind of rubbed off on me, this anti-religious kind of thing.
Sure. Because he hated Catholics. Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, it just and I kind of bought into that, and he's obviously being a little too harsh about things.
But he was brilliant.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
My God. Yeah, and more of a poet than people realize as well. I mean,
And he was a musician too. He composed opera. He did all. He was involved in a lot of different things that people are, not commonly known.
Yeah, and then tragically, his sister kind of took over, and everyone associated him with the Nazis and sort of thing. But he was an equal opportunity hater. It wasn't just the Jews.
That's right.
Everybody. But so going back to the old philosophers, and I think about, and when you mentioned the Enlightenment, there's kind of always a separation that's kind of in the tradition of philosophy, between the world and something else,
yes,
like above and beyond, and many of the branches of philosophy and science will say that something that you can't confirm or deny, you can't, verify, is nonsense. So they won't even touch it in a sort of way. But we operate mostly in the realm of ideas.
That's right.
I mean, this is where everything is happening. Anything of really import. The physical things are not the things that we're really paying attention to. What really moves the world is ideas and words and talking and images even. That sort of thing. And I think, when you get to Plato's cave and even like the message of the Christ, is kind of like this idea about there's this realm of ideas that's kind of separate, and humans have access to it. This is the kind of special thing about us, is that what separates us from the animal kingdom and everything else is that we have access to this abstract realm. And some will consider that to be a religious realm. Some will consider it to be just an abstract intellectual realm. I don't know. But how do you, for example, see within your worldview this notion of like the emotions you mentioned a few minutes ago, like you're trying to, learn and deal with these things as I am over the last several years. What are emotions to you? Like, what is anger to you? What do you do with it? How does it fit within your, worldview?
That's really tough stuff. So specifically, you mentioned anger because I did struggle with anger, and it took me many years to realize that I actually had an anger problem.
Yeah.
Decades, in fact. And it's really, at least for me, in the context of seeing, your kids and your wife kind of go into fear.
Wow.
Right? That you realize that, this is not good. And so I had to really embrace the fact that I had a real problem, not unlike, let's say, smoking or something like that. And so I needed to really, really get rigorously honest with myself and acknowledge that I needed help. So, in my case, it meant a little bit of therapy, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. In the context of, spirituality and my own Christian faith, Catholic faith, it again, getting into prayer and asking for help, etc. At those moments of feeling rageful or whatnot. And I have to say, it's been, I actually could tell you when the last time was that I lost it, right?
Oh, yeah, me too.
December 13th, 2013. December 15th, 2013. So it's been a while.
And is that because you're recognizing it earlier? Because that's what I'm noticing. It's like,
yes,
if you recognize it earlier, you can change course in a way.
Well, I think I realized that I can't go there.
Right.
It's a destructive place. Other people may be able to get away with getting angry, but I'm not one of them.
What happens?
Well,
does the locus of control go away in some sense? Do you feel like...
I feel violent.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? No, I didn't beat people up in my family, but I'm just saying that that's where I want to go. I want, it's rageful, and that's another topic in terms of the role of the male with testosterone.
I was just going to say, we're susceptible
in modern society. It's not really welcome in many places. Maybe that's why I enjoy powerlifting, right? Let go of a lot of testosterone there, and it's wonderful to put out that kind of physical energy and channeling in that way. I really, so I think that's helped out a lot too for me personally. Yeah,
for me, it's almost like I didn't really I was going to say I didn't really discover my body until, the last few years ago, but it's kind of true in a sense. Even though I was, very much involved in, athletics, and I focused a lot on my, I would train and I would push myself and, pay attention to my body in that sense. But I paid attention to it only in the sense that if I paid attention to a message coming from my body, it was so that I could suppress it, so that I could push it away, so that I could deny it, so that I could overcome it. Whereas once I discovered that these things are kind of working within the body, recognizing them, like anger, for example, you can start a different cycle that will, move it in another direction. And, or like you said, if you're powerlifting, you could bring it out into the world in that way. But I find that you don't even have to bring it out into the world. It's like you could change it within you, it seems, that anger could turn into joy in some sense if you get good at this kind of thing, and I'm wondering about that.
For me, it's gratitude has really played a key role in that. So, I think anger in my case is really about, resentment about not having my own way, let's say ultimately.
Right. It's an obstruction of some of your desires in some sense, or
or about looking at this the half empty kind of piece, right? And so it's been a systematic, if you will, way of reorienting and saying, no, actually, this cup is half full. Let's be grateful for this. What's in the cup.
Yeah, that's such an incredibly.
Let's get into that energy and let's really, I was just looking on my way over here. I noticed these little birds, and listening to them, and I sound really corny, but I was really, really noticing them.
Yeah,
so mindfulness. The whole idea of mindfulness has really helped me at all, and really rejoice in that, and those little beautiful little birds, right?
Smell and stop and smell the roses, as they say. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so easy to ignore beauty in the world, and it is everywhere. And like you said, with the half full glass, it's a matter of interpretation and context, and framing the world in a way. And even earlier when we were talking about how when we turn 50, you start noticing these creaks and things. I'm wondering how much of that is because we expected to. It's like, oh, I'm 50 now, so maybe things are different. So then unconsciously you start these little cycles and things start happening. Maybe these, I think of it this way in some ways. When you go through certain life stages, there are dramatic shifts. Like when you enter puberty, there's like a dramatic shift. You become a completely different person. Sure. And maybe like menopause or whatever, andropause they call it, could be another kind of a thing where you become a totally different person. But I think these some of those processes that we have aren't as strong as that, but they're kind of like lighter versions of these processes and cycles that we have that are dependent on what triggers them. Like it doesn't have to come about in your life, but if you do certain things in your life, you start these modules that will then start kind of a life of their own, and then you find yourself moving in certain directions because you've started something. It's like the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step kind of a thing. And I'm starting to realize that it's about creating habits and, but good habits.
Right. Right. I totally identify with that. The importance of habits. And in some ways for me, I'm always kind of tinkering, okay, what habits do I have in place and how can I change them this month or this week? What else can I change up? Because at the end of the day, for me, I'm trying to establish a really kind of peace of mind, regardless of what's happening externally, just to be in a place of real peacefulness and real peace. Right.
Do you seek out change in your, like, do you, because I do, but it might be different when you have, a family with 6 kids, right? It's not like you can just pick up and say, well, I'm going to just change my life tomorrow and get in an RV and move somewhere. But
always.
Do you feel like
depending on what you mean by that, absolutely. It's not only, for me, it's not only about growing and continually growing, and some, maybe it's the German background. My mom's German and
German Mexican.
German Mexican.
Awesome.
So always improving, growing, greater consciousness, but also at this age and stage of life, also learning that there's a difference between growth and also healing from past wounds, not only inflicted by others, but also self-inflicted, right? So really healing from that stuff. So in some bizarre way, I'm finding that in these later years, these very ancient things are coming back. Yeah. Just to put a quick plug on medieval rhyme, which is another aspect for me that just really fascinates me about medieval rhyme, is that we are in some ways talking about these old things, right? First of all, it's kind of old music, kind of 80s music. It's a bunch of old guys. I'm in my 50s, right? We're talking about ancient philosophy,
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of, in a culture where everything is about the new and novelty and instant gratification, constantly kind of being plugged into your social media, et cetera, can we take a little breath and see what it is, where we're coming from, not only as a civilization, but more, I would say more personally, in our own souls, right? And so I think with that comes, at least in my experience and in my journey right now, it just feels right. It feels good,
Awesome.
most of the time.
Well, yeah. It can't be perfect. So do you go to church on a regular basis? Is that, yeah?
I certainly do. Yeah. We actually live right beside a church.
Oh, wow.
And one of my jobs is to close that church every night.
Kidding.
So yeah. So I look at it as a place of to quietly kind of recollect myself and
And this is a Catholic church?
it is. It's a Catholic. Yes, correct.
How do you pick a religion? I mean, like, what draws you to that as opposed to, I don't know, some other?
That's such a personal thing. I have friends that are, Jewish, and friends that are Muslim, and friends, different kinds of friends that are, that are different sides on the Christian side of things. I can speak of as my own journey. I was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
I would say quite nominally so, more of the cultural variety. So we didn't go to Mass, as we call it in Catholicism, very often. And then in my late teens, I went into the Protestant world. Actually, the culmination of my reading all this kind of Bible stuff with the metal music was becoming a born again for a few years, until I started reading philosophy, and I thought, with all due respect to my Protestant cousins, let's just say St. Thomas Aquinas and the
Back
gang,
to the classics.
Really, let's just say, So that. I just found it a lot more, again, I'm trying to be respectful. I just connected with it in a lot deeper and more comprehensive way, right, with Catholicism. Now, I will say that it's been, it's been quite a journey since I think I've been Catholic now for 20 years or so. And I recognize that, well, like the word Catholic means kind of universal. There's many different kinds of Catholicism, right? And so I realize there's got to acknowledge that there are quite a few differences, but for me, it's really been, in a way, a starting point, in the sense of constantly going out there and discovering and learning. So, for example, I alluded to the Bible. Recently, I discovered this fantastic free content at Yale University. You can listen to this amazing content about the state of biblical scholarship right now.
Yeah,
and it's all for free, and all you got to just plug, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah, right? There's infinite access to infinite information. And so, what's interesting, I'm noticing it with regard to these current technologies that we have and what's going on in Silicon Valley and all of these social media and artificial intelligence and everything else that's going on. It sounds more and more like, especially the talk coming out of Silicon Valley with this, what's expected in the near future with technological updates. It sounds religious in a sense. It sounds like it's kind of a techno-utopian framework in which they're starting to view the world. It's as if, for example, this networking is seen by some to lead to real networking amongst people, as we start to implant devices into us.
Sure.
And they become networked and they become kind of, outsourced parts of our brains and our bodies. In a way, we are in the near future going to be much more connected, or the possibility will exist. And there might be kind of a blurring of experiences at some point, because once we connect things that are connected into our brain, and maybe we're even able to share some experiences, there's going to be a blurring of like, what am I? Who are you? What is the collective? And in some ways that sounds kind of like a Catholic in a way, like, bringing everybody together. And so like it or not, it almost seems like we're going to end up in a kind of a communion of souls, you might call it. And yeah.
Although I will say, and I have to imagine that with your philosophy background, you would totally get this and be totally onto it. But I really do believe, or rather I'm under the sincere persuasion that as wonderful as technology is, there is always a cost. Am I a Luddite? Absolutely not. However, there is a give and take with any piece of technology. So
absolutely, you got to proceed with caution with everything. Yeah.
Right. So I personally have a concern, right? Again, like a lot of parents with the smartphone phenomenon revolution, right? You're seeing these kids being plugged in constantly, almost to the level of they were calling Blackberries crackberries a while ago. So
good reason, yeah.
There's all this stuff coming out that the use of smartphones really is akin to a genuine addiction.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're seeing attention spans, the effect. I don't know if you have any friends that are teaching in the universities, but it's a real issue. It's a real issue. So, that's a very small example, but I think with all this other technology, I think that we have to be very mindful. And I want to say that's another kind of theme that does come up lyrically in the rhyme is a little bit of a Ludditism in there. It's like,
But it's the kind of thing that you can't win either way. It's like, you can't stop it.
It's a dilemma. We're really trapped in the horns of a dilemma there. I really do believe that.
And especially, for example, things like stem cell research or like CRISPR-9. I don't know if you're familiar with this CRISPR-9 technology, which will allow us to basically edit our genes while we're living and change ourselves. So you could make yourself taller, change your eye color. This exists now. I mean, they're testing it on smaller animals right now. But so right now there's kind of a ban on doing that with humans around the world. But how are you going to enforce that, right? Yeah. So somebody in North Korea, China, wherever is going to be doing this. And if you stay out of the game, then someone else is going to be way ahead. So as much as you want to be cautious about it, you can't really stay out, it seems. And so in some ways, there's a bit of pessimism there in that it's almost inevitable that something's going to go wrong with some of these technologies, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to AI, there's a lot of talk about that recently. But that's another kind of an interesting religious theme to that as well, because to me, it seems like we're going to be creating these entities that are going to be so much more advanced, powerful, all-seeing than compared to us, that in some sense they will be like a god in terms of capacity to us. So in a strange sort of way, how Nietzsche said, what was it? God is dead, but we created him and then killed him. Then it's like we're creating him again.
That's right. That's right.
Except we're doing it with different means right now.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously a very big topic. I have a friend actually has done a lot of work in bioethics. It strikes me that the fear that of yesteryear or maybe even currently about the in the realm of the military and nuclear armaments and warheads, etc. I think that the bigger concern and danger could be in the biological.
Sure, there's no shortage of threats. It seems like, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much going on. It seems a lot more immediate.
Mm-hmm. And you can also just, 3D print, even, biological pathogens. So imagine that.
Right. I would just say from my own view, I think would be just beware of all that stuff, for sure.
So do you have an optimistic view of the future? Like, how do you engage with the future?
Wow. So I'm so focused on one day at a time. Going back to the anger piece, I realized how much was wrapped up in fears of tomorrow or resentments from the past. So big focus on today, and in some ways, it's a bit of a kind of a faith answer. I'm ultimately not in control or running the universe.
It's true.
Like,
right?
Wow, that actually is a thing I had to say to myself. And
although some solipsists would disagree with.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I think it's metaphysically and ontologically absolutely correct thing to say, but also psychologically, I think it's very important for me to confess and profess, because I can't. I mean, at the end of the day, as a Christian, I will say that life is a comedy, a divine comedy from Dante Alighieri. There is going to be a happy ending. And I think for most of us, whether you're a Catholic or not, honestly, I do think that we're in for a happy ending. It is going to be, and it is, there's a lot of ugly things going on, and we have to work through this whole kind of drama of evil. I'm going to just call it out, because there's a lot of very horrible things happening in the world, and will continue to be going on. But I think the ultimate narrative has a quote unquote happy ending, right?
Does that mean,
for me,
afterlife happy ending? Is that what you're referring to, or?
I think so.
Yeah. So how do you envision that? I'm curious. So what happens when we die?
So I don't know. I'm gonna go with that. I really,
it's a mystery.
So
right?
no, I mean, there's a whole section of philosophy called eschatology, study of the last things. Honestly, I haven't spent much time in it, although it's gonna sound funny. One of the songs we did we did write, and I spent quite a bit of time with lyrics, was on the apocalypse, right? The last day, which is a rewrite of the Dies Irae. Dies Irae is Day of Wrath. It's a medieval poem, very famous medieval poem and chant that talks about the end of the world. And so we kind of did a re-look at that, and throwing in, quoting parts of the poem in Latin, but also in English, just to,
such a
because the
metal
Latin can sound pretty intense if it's done properly.
Yeah.
Although it can also sound Italian, so you gotta watch out.
Yeah. Make it sound like a chant, I guess. Yeah.
Right. So, so so that's tough stuff, right?
We're at the stage right now where we can take a break, and I don't know if you want to play some bass, maybe, or
what time is it?
Yeah, let's have a look. It's 10 after 5, and we got
some time then.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to play a little?
Well, we can try it.
Yeah. All right.
We can try it.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some.
And see if you can use it, great. So this is a Roscoe bass, and so they make some. I call these entry-level boutique instruments. Bass guitars has become a bit of a racket, I'm going to say. There's a lot of great instruments out there. Just to give you a sense, a U.S.-made Fender will cost you just over $1,000, and you can spend on a boutique instrument, let's say, although you can go beyond it, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000.
Ouch. Yeah.
Right. So this brand new would be like a $2,000 instrument. So it just plays really nicely, and it's just great. I love it.
Slap at it.
So there's some slapping. It's been more of more in,
different genre.
Different genres. So there's some that have brought it into heavier music.
I guess what is it? The Red Hot Chili Peppers. He's slapping, right?
So he's got good slapping there, and.
So what's your style?
Rage Against the Machine. Well, so I'll play some of it. So keeping in mind, I'm gonna do something. I thought just to give some context. When I started the instrument, I was told, okay, Rich, play the bass line. Here you go. Okay, so those just a little bit there, that covers like a lot of different songs.
Right.
And I'm not going to mention any names, just, because sometimes that really works.
Yeah.
And that's what the song calls for, and that's great. But that's not why I wanted to play the instrument, right? I wanted something a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to play just a part of, every metal band's got a tune about Vikings. It's called the Viking tune. I think literally the very first tune we ever wrote. So I'll give you a little bit of a sense.
Cool.
And it's not the whole thing, just
Yeah.
part of it. Starting from the beginning. So I'm going to imagine this kind of like Vikings kind of roaring towards the shore here at the beginning, and there's a battle ensuing, whatnot. But obviously I'm not going to sing. This is just all...
You're welcome.
This is just a bass line. See if I can pull this off.
Sure.
I can't do it.
That's awesome. Sounds great.
So that's the part I wanted to play.
Very nice.
So that's just the beginning of it, right? Mm-hmm. But again, you have a little bit of harmonic development, to use the technical term. So it's a little bit more going on than
It's
just
more involved, yeah.
the straightforward stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, that's not the heaviest thing, but something a little bit, more straightforward. So a section from the song that I want to record. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do the vocals in the middle of it. To me, it's a real showcase, the vocals that I envision.
And you do the vocals in the band?
No, it would be Nick Walsh from Sick Toxic
right.
sing the stuff.
So who used to sing it?
Well, quite a different character from the past.
Okay.
The core group of the Rhyme was the two guitar players and myself as the bass player, and we got different drummers and singers, and we try to find the right singer and the right drummer. We just never ended up finding the right singer and the right
those
drummer.
are so crucial. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely. So it's just a small section from Blind Faith, which is a tune that I want to go in the studio and record. And again, I'm not sure how this is going to sound.
Let's do it.
Cool. Etc. Cool. Right. So that's just and the last piece I would want to play just a section of is from a tune called Mentor Dementor. Dementor. And so that is, we're talking, so it's basically a term for the world, right? So basically like a crazy teacher, right? So demented mentor.
Yeah.
We're getting all these conflicting messages from the world. So this is wanted to convey the insanity of our environment most of the time musically. Now I won't be able to do different parts of it, but I just thought I would just pick this one section and see if I can pull it off.
Great.
Right? So it's a little bit more heavy. So Again. Etc. So just a little bit of a flavor there.
Yeah, it's funny when you were playing that, I could kind of hear and imagine a metal song around that. Mm-hmm. So it's gonna be curious when I hear that song.
Thank you.
See how I imagined it and how it. Awesome, good job. That you were getting into a groove there on that last one. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So so that gives you a little bit of a flavor. Again, it's difficult with technology to do a little bit more.
Yeah.
But by its nature, the bass is more of an accompaniment instrument. Mm-hmm. Although I will say that for me, and we haven't really talked about it, is that the beginning and sometimes maybe even the end for me as an instrumentalist is Bach, right? So very big influence. So I'll often
There's a bit of a fugue going on there, maybe. Yeah.
So I will work on his different pieces from time to time, and they're very challenging, but there's so much going on in them. The well-tempered clavier. I'll just do a bit of it. Et cetera, right? So, but there's a lot of musicality going on there, and so it's that's been a really big influence, and we do throw in some counterpoint at different sections of our pieces, right? So make it as interesting as we can.
What do you think why is medieval connected with metal? Is it because of the Iron Age or what? What is? No, that's
so I don't know that. I don't know that either. I think heavy. I mean, it might have. I don't know. I should have an answer for that.
I wonder.
But somehow that whole kind of era has attracted the imagination of these more minor keyed musicians, right? A lot of the music is in the minor key. I wonder whether, again, going back to these kind of religious themes, they might have had, the most pure or not forms in the Middle Ages.
Right. But I also noticed that it seems to attract also the kid, for example, who's like a Dungeons and Dragons type kid, who's into that kind of fantasy realm, medieval type worlds and narratives.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Kind of fit together. And of course, Neil Peart was well into all of that, lyrically, all that weird stuff.
That's right too. That's right too. And I think, and so yes, I think it's associated more with the kind of realm of fantasy, but. As I was just reading, actually, funnily enough, I was just browsing through a new book on the Middle Ages, and I think the author there was arguing that, he wanted to show that the Middle Ages is really not the Dark Ages of unreason and fantasy. It's actually, he would see it quite the opposite, that it's a culture of reason. So you think about, again... That's
when it was taking root. Yeah.
Pre-Enlightenment, like all of that, astronomy and they're heavily into logic and education and whatnot. So it's a whole other realm there. But I guess I still don't ultimately know.
Yeah, gotta look into that. So November 20th, is that
correct?
Yeah. when
when
okay.
it started.
And give us some how would they find it? We'll put it on the description as well, so people could go and hopefully contribute to your
Thank you. Yeah, so just doing a search under Gudiño for generosity.com. There's an Indiegogo.
Yeah.
So and or Medieval Rhyme. Either of them should land on it, and again, you'll get an opportunity. For $1, you get the completed song when it's completed.
Nice.
For $10 or a little bit more, you'll get a song plus a copy of Rumor magazine with the cover of Tony Iommi on it. And we have a couple of other perks there you have to look at. Some of them include bass lessons. There's a few other fun things we got included in there.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Richard.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's been a blast talking to you.
It's been really fun. Thank you very much.
I hope this takes off for you. So either way, it's going to be a lot of fun, but it sounds...
Either way, it's going to be a lot of fun, exactly.
Awesome. Can you give me a high five here?
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks a lot.